Oh, hello, it's your number one fat Asian. As you can see, I'm not quite as fat anymore. And I tried everything to lose weight, and the only thing that actually worked for me was low carb, keto. And that is why I've been loving Factor meal plans. Factor delivers never frozen meals and smoothies directly to your door, and they're ready to eat in 2 minutes. All you gotta do is unsleeve the bitch, pop a few holes in it, throw it in the microwave, and in 2 minutes, you're eating. And you're eating good. And I know what you're thinking, microwave food, this can't be good, right? No, it's actually delicious. I've been eating this shit for 2 months now, and I got everybody hooked. My girlfriend's onto it, my parents are loving it, my roommates are stealing every meal they can from me. They are the definition of nutritious and delicious. And it just saves me so much time and energy so that I can do the things that I actually want to do, like go outside in the summer or, edit a video. And if keto isn't your thing, have no fear. Vegans, vegetarians, calorie watchers, or if you just want to go balls to the wall, it's all tasty. Whatever model you want to fit into your life, Factor can basically be customized to you. And since they are the lovely sponsor of today's video, they're going to be hooking us up with a huge discount code. And I'm going to put the link at the very top of the doobly-doo. But if you go right now to go.factor75.com/BMOnus130 and you use the code BMOnus130 at checkout, you will get a outstanding $130 off the next 6 boxes you order. And have more time and health to do the things that you actually want to do. All right, now, back to the show. Well, hello there, my fellow American. And perhaps non-Americans. I see that you are interested in the real reason why the NFL is the uncontested king of American sports. Ah, yes. Fantasy football. The fantasy sport that started it all. A nearly inescapable force that has become a multi-billion-dollar industry built upon another multi-billion-dollar industry. And I am here to tell you that today, even if you know nothing about the NFL, or if you don't even have the first clue about fantasy sports, you should still give fantasy football a shot. Because for my newbies out there, fantasy football is arguably the best introduction to understanding the NFL and arguably the easiest fantasy sport to play. And even for all my hardcore sports fans, I would make the further argument that fantasy football creates one of the best, if not the best, live sports viewing experiences for any sport in the world, period. And plus it gives you a second team to root for that hopefully will not let you down as much as the Detroit Lions. Or even worse, if you're a Manchester United fan. It is rough with no lube right now. So as I do, let me be your guide into what essentially is the Dungeons and Dragons of sports nerdom. And in this video, I'm going to give you the basic rundown on how to get started, some helpful tips and tricks for success. And by the time I'm done with this, hopefully I will have you primed and ready for the fantasy football season. Welcome to a Clueless American's Guide to Fantasy Football. Now starting off, let's say you're a complete noob when it comes to the NFL. You ask questions like, what is a 3rd down and 4? Why do they kick off versus punting it? And why is it called football when it's shaped like an egg? Well, if you actually want to get the bare bone basics, I actually did a Clueless guide on the NFL. Click up on the eye things over here. But here's the genius thing about fantasy football, and that is, you don't need to learn any of that shit. You honestly could know almost next to nothing about the NFL, and you could still play fantasy football. And this is why I think it's one of the best introductions to the sport that owns a day of the week in America. Because even a non-NFL fan probably knows the names of Tom Brady or Patrick Mahomes. But they probably have no clue what actually makes them good. And what fantasy football does is it takes the stats of a Patrick Mahomes throwing for 400 yards and 4 touchdowns and translates it to a neat and tidy little score of 45.6 points. You might not understand what an RPO is, but even you can understand that Patrick Mahomes scoring you 45.6 points is much better than Kirk Cousins scoring you a tiny dick 16.8 points.
You like that?
And fantasy does this for every offensive player in the league, minus the fat lineman. It takes the yardage, it takes the touchdowns, it takes the catches, and it translates and boils it all down to an easy to understand points total. So all the big names you've heard of, the Justin Jeffersons, the Derrick Henrys, the Travis Kelce's, you get to see quantifiably just how much better they are than the average player in the league. Now, in order to play fantasy, you have to go ahead and join a league, typically of 8 to 12 people. And if you have no friends, you could join a public league. Listen, it's tough out there. But once you have joined a league, you have to go ahead and draft your team. And this is not too unlike the NFL draft. And once the draft order is selected, you go ahead, pick a time and a date. And then during the draft, you go ahead and you take turns picking a player for a team. And unlike in fantasy European football, once you pick a player for your team, no one else can pick that player. Your team is unique to everyone else in your league. And you keep going back and forth in a snake draft until you fill out your roster, which is typically 1 quarterback, 2 wide receivers, 2 running backs, a tight end, a defense, a kicker, and a flex. And now, I'm pretty sure a lot of you newbies are like, I know none of these positions. What the fuck are you talking about? And if that is the case for you, fret not. Because once again, this is American fantasy football. That means they had to make this American proof. And we Americans are dumb. We are very, very dumb. So that is why, pretty much in any fantasy draft you do online, if you literally touch nothing, the program will auto-draft a team for you. Yes, you heard me right. You just need to join a league and touch nothing, and the computer will do everything for you. Which, at first, may sound a little bit lame, but if you're just starting out, if you have no clue what the fuck is going on, it's not a terrible option. It'll probably do a way better job than if you actually tried to draft. And in my opinion, of many years of playing fantasy football, the majority of people would probably do better if they just let the computer draft for them. Think about it. The average sports fan in America is a dumbass. I'm a dumbass. You think we're gonna beat a computer? You think we're gonna beat the algorithm? And even if, let's say, you're the most knowledgeable NFL head in all planet Earth, it honestly doesn't give you that big of an advantage when it comes to fantasy football. In fact, I can almost guarantee that you, Mr. Noob, with your auto-drafted team, will probably beat at least 1 or 2 veterans in your league if you play against them. Because here's the thing that most fantasy heads and all these fantasy football podcasts don't want to admit, and that is, fantasy football is mostly luck. You could be the most knowledgeable NFL fan in the world, and at best, you're just making educated guesses. To prove my point, I have a story about an NFL quarterback named Matt Hasselbeck. Now, Matt Hasselbeck was playing a league where obviously he drafted himself in fantasy. And during the championship week, he actually sat himself in fantasy because he was playing the toughest defense in the NFL for that game. And so he played another quarterback over himself in fantasy that week. And what ended happening in that game was a huge offensive shootout. He had a career game, and he ended up being the #1 scoring quarterback in fantasy that week. And if he had just started himself, he would have won that championship. That is how little people actually know when it comes to fantasy sports. The actual quarterback didn't even start himself. And no matter your best laid plans, fantasy football is the ultimate chaos sport. And for a newbie like you, chaos is a ladder. Horrible things will happen. Running backs, ACLs can be snapped, QBs can get concussed, and your star rookie wide receiver can drive his car 100 miles per hour into some poor lady, blowing her up, and get sent to jail for vehicular manslaughter. That actually happened last year. Look it up. As I said, it is a league of chaos. And any given Sunday, even the most stacked teams can get picked off by some 3-touchdown performance of a random running back you picked off of waivers. And that's why, if you're just starting out, go ahead and auto-draft your team. Because one, it'll probably do a better job than if you actually tried. And secondly, and almost more importantly, every time you win, and especially if you beat a long-term NFL fan, you get to remind them that your team was auto-drafted. And then you sit back and you watch the tilt, the salt in their eyes consume their soul. Delicious. But beyond alienating friends and family, fantasy football solves one of the fundamental issues of getting into any sport. And that is, why the fuck should you care? Why should you root for any team or player in any sport? Well, for some, it's just about bragging rights. It's about talking shit to your friends. But if you'd like to sweeten the pot a little bit, if you are of age, I would suggest that you throw in a little scratch. To start out, everyone just throws in $5, $10, whatever you can afford, really. And at the end of the year, the winner or second place gets part of that pot. And to keep everyone from playing for something, there should be a penalty for whoever comes in last place. For my European friends, think of it as a relegation battle. Now, some leagues have taken this to extremes, like making this guy totally reenact the Sia video. And let's be honest, he's fucking killing it. This is outstanding. But once again, if you're just starting out, do something small. Have the last place guy wear a dunce hat for the draft next year. Or they have to buy dinner or drink for everyone else in the league. But basically, you want to have stakes at every level of your league. And if bragging rights is all you need, then go for that. But in my experience, some monetary motivation never seemed to hurt. As long as you're doing it responsibly, okay? Especially if you're brand new to this, don't go jumping into any insane buy-in leagues. But if you're going to afford $5 to $10, consider it as you're paying for entertainment for the next 4 months. Because once you have stakes in these games, the team you end up drafting will now become this ragtag group of players/heroes that you will root for this season. And for every Sunday for the next 14 weeks or so, those 9 players that you pick to start and the 9 players that your opponent starts against you will become instant heroes and villains. And with facing a new lineup every single week, you will quickly learn who are the big boys of the NFL. You will learn to curse the names of Cooper Kupp and Lamar Jackson, while exclaiming in high exultation the name of Jamar Chase. You could easily make an argument that a player's star power in the NFL now is based more around their fantasy output than actually winning games. Case in point, Justin Jefferson has yet to make the playoffs, but he is pretty much universally loved and praised because he is such a monster when it comes to fantasy football. But okay, let's say you're convinced that you draft up your team with your league mates. What do you do now? Well, every week, you need to go ahead and set your lineup, which means you pick the 9 players who will be scoring you points for the week. And in this aspect, fantasy football is actually the laziest fantasy sport that you could play. Because unlike baseball and basketball, who you need to set your lineup almost nightly, NFL teams play once a week, which means you need to check on your team just once a week. And some sites even have tools that will optimize your lineup for you. Now, you may need to replace a player in your lineup sometimes because 1 week out of the year they have a break called a bye, or more likely than not, some of your players will get injured and be out a couple of weeks, if not the season. And to replace them, you need to grab a player off the waiver wire. These players are free agents that aren't on anybody's team. Now, Clueless knew about you might be a little bit fearful here. How do I know who to pick? I don't know anything about the NFL. But once again, have no fear, because all you need to do is Google best waiver wire pickups for this week. Now, your search results will be about 20 articles, but they're all going to say pretty much the same thing. Here's the best 5 running backs you can pick up this week. Here are the best 5 wide receivers to pick up this week. And the NFL games, they run on Thursday, Saturday, and Monday. So Tuesday morning, while you're taking a shit, just go ahead, 5 minutes, read who are the best pickups, put in a few waiver claims, and you go ahead and you replace that player that week. From that point on, you set it and forget it till Sunday. And that is pretty much the basics of how your fantasy season is going to go down. So, okay, you drafted your team, you've set your lineup for the week. And for your troubles, you now get to experience what I would argue is the single best viewing experience a fan can have in modern day. If you really think about it, fantasy football is pretty genius when it comes to the NFL. They found a way to not only increase fan interaction, from taking players from literally every team in the league, they have now made every minute of every game important to fantasy players. It doesn't matter if it's a blowout halfway across the country in a game that has no playoff implications. You're still screaming at the top of your lungs for Tom Brady to throw a garbage time touchdown, even though they're up by 30. Who cares? Now, you might be seeing a problem here. If I have players from all these different teams and they're all playing simultaneously, how can I keep track of them? And that leads me to a live TV channel that the NFL created that is nearly a mandatory subscription for anybody who plays fantasy during the NFL season. As every Sunday, as you get your beer and your snacks of choice ready, you get to tune in to the most devious invention in recent TV history as it pertains to sports. Welcome to NFL Red Zone, a channel that shows you in real time every single highlight-worthy play around the league. And since the overall majority of games take place on Sunday, that you'll either have a player on your team or a player that you're going against on that screen at any given time. To break it all down, basically anything and everything worthwhile for a fantasy player to see is broadcast every Sunday for 7 hours straight. And best of all, it's all commercial free. Yes. The main bane of watching any NFL game is the fucking commercials. They are nonstop, incessant, and annoying as all fuckery. But with the NFL Red Zone, you can kiss that fucking asshole gecko goodbye. And what makes this truly live sports viewing nirvana is that with touchdowns and long plays being such a huge point swings when it comes to weekly matchups in fantasy, seeing someone from your lineup rumble for a 60-yard touchdown will give you a dopamine hit worthy of the gods. Just imagine this scenario. You're in a weekly matchup with your most bitter of rivals, and his team is going off, and it looks like it's all over for you. But with 3 minutes left in the game, Jamar Chase catches a short slant, breaks 2 defenders' ankles, hits that extra gear, and scores a 70-yard touchdown, swinging the match back in your favor. And let's say, hypothetically, that your bitterest of rivals is on Discord with you, and while you are screaming in utter glee, you get to hear his expletive-filled rant. All the troubles in the world simply melts away in that moment. There's this iconic scene from the American classic. You might have heard of it. It's called The Fast and the Furious. And in the scene, Dom Toretto talks about what he loves most about drag racing. And that is, in those 10 seconds or less, all the troubles of the world melt away. All his anxieties, his fear in his life, they're gone. For those 10 seconds or less, he's free. And that is exactly how I feel every Sunday during fantasy football season. Except for 10 seconds, it's
7 hours of commercial-free football.
And for those 7 hours, I am free. I am commercial-free. And all is right with the world. No other sport, to my knowledge, has this perfect storm that allows a merging of fantasy and live sports. NBA and baseball games are way too spread out. The Premier League isn't all too bad with most of their games on Saturday and Sunday. And to my knowledge, I don't think the Premier League has a channel like Red Zone. Correct me if I'm wrong. But with fantasy NFL, it just hits that sweet spot experience that no other fantasy sport can duplicate. And to that I say, fair warning, because it's honestly like the heroine of sports viewing. Because sometimes I've just gone full zombie mode for 7 hours. I forget to pee. I don't really eat. So yeah, if anyone who has a significant other out there, this could possibly end relationships. But here's the thing. Even if your girl drags you out, you can get Red Zone streaming. So even as you're shopping at the IKEA, you can still be plugged in to that sweet, sweet slow drip of fantasy heroin. And if you play fantasy football for the next 4 months of the year, you get to look forward to every Sunday being this welcomed oasis from the shit sandwich that is your life. And for that I say, God bless. God fucking bless America and long live fantasy football. Now, for my international friends who are watching this, you can also get access to Red Zone. You can go ahead and sign up for NFL Game Pass International, and that's going to be about $30 a month. Not the cheapest, but if you split it with some of your boys and watch it over Discord, wink, quite affordable. And for my Americans, many cable and satellite packages come with Red Zone, but if you cut the cord, then Sling TV is the cheapest option, coming in at $35. They actually have two packages, but both of them include NFL Red Zone. And as for which site to use for fantasy, I mean, I personally love the Yahoo Fantasy Leagues. The ESPN and the NFL apps are fine. Actually, the NFL one's kind of shit. And they're all free to use, but I've just been using Yahoo for years, and I still think it has the best interface. Although I have been hearing good things about Sleeper, haven't tried it. So if anyone wants to champion them or any other platform in the comments, feel free. Now, I freely recognize that I have glossed over a lot in this video. I did not go in depth at all. This video was just basically a quick pitch and telling you why it's so fucking dope to actually play fantasy football. And I think for you newbies, just auto draft and then play out the first season and see if you even like it. But if you do get into it and you want to learn more nuances, I would suggest listening to a podcast. And personally, I think the best combination of both informative fantasy advice and genuinely funny banter is the Fantasy Footballers. Yes, that's their actual name. It's the most generic name in all of history. But trust me, this trio has genuinely good chemistry. And personally, they are my preferred choice to keep up on everything NFL during the fantasy season. You can listen to them on wherever you find your podcast, or you can check out their YouTube channel. Not sponsored, just been a big fan for years. And that's where I'm going to leave off this video for now. I got the preview for the NFL coming up, so stay tuned for that in about 2 weeks. And then a week after that, I'm going to be going ahead and rounding up everything that happened in the transfer window and basically give you my thoughts and feelings about how goddamn shitty Manchester United is. Oh, hi, it's the Fat Asian. Just want to say thank you guys for watching. If you did enjoy, go ahead, take your hard direct nipple, smooch into the like button right now. Really helps me out in this godforsaken algorithm. And of course, I'd like to go ahead and take this opportunity to thank all my patronos keeping me alive during all this global BS. And of course, a personal shout out to some of my most loyal patrons. Of course, I'm talking about Fritz Gordon, Chris Sue, and Chris O'Reilly. Thank you guys so much. And yeah, that's pretty much going to be it from me, BMOnus. Hopefully you guys are having a wonderful day. Remember, stay yourselves, stay humble. Until next time, guys, as always, America.